it's Jane. Happy All Saints Day! It's November, and so I'm going to do an October wrap-up of the books that I read in October. So there were 12 books that I read in October. Most of them were pretty good, so that's a good reading month for me. The first 4 I'm going to mention really quickly were all the first volumes of an ongoing series. I don't know how I managed to start, well actually 5 series this month. That was not good planning, but here we go. The first one of these I read was Retribution Falls by Chris Wooding. It was a bit of fun. It's kind of a wild westy kind of space opera-y kind of thing. I read that it was a little bit like Firefly. I actually nearly didn't finish this book because it starts really slow, and in fact the main character is quite unlikable at the beginning, but things turn around. I'm glad I finished it. The second one of these was Master and Commander by Patrick O'Brien, which is the beginning of the Aubrey Maturin series, for which he is famous. This is one of my husband's favourite series. It's a real comfort read for him. I'd seen the movie, but I never actually read the books. It is well written. I completely understand why these are, bestsellers. It's not 100% up my line, but I could imagine on a holiday picking up the next volume, or continuing on. The third one that I read like this was The Recruit, which is the first of the Cherub series by Robert Muchamore. I'd actually had this recommended to me for one of my kids, and then there was a read-along for it that Leslie at Words of a Reader was running, and so I thought I'd take the opportunity to have a look at it. It's kind of a kids action adventure thing. I initially gave it 3 stars, but on reflection I've actually reduced that on my Goodreads rating. I can understand why, there's lots of action and stuff happening, but at parts it was quite violent. It's really quite bleak. I'm not that sold on these, but anyway, there you go. I'm glad I read it. Fourth one of these, starting a series that I read, was Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier. Juliet Marillier is Tanya at List Obsessed Readers' favourite author, and I've been really enjoying Tanya's videos, so I thought I should give Juliet Marillier a try. She's an Australian author who I had not read. This is a fantasy book set in Ireland, centuries back. The conflict in this story is kind of about the Anglo-Saxons coming into Ireland. There's stuff about druids, and a lot of the story is really about the world that it's set in. It kind of, again, isn't really my thing, but it was well done, and I could imagine reading another one, but I didn't rush out to, because so many books. The next 2 that I read were Horror Store, which I've done a review of, and you've probably seen because it's suddenly everywhere, of course, because it was October. And the one that I read for my in real life book club this month was Holidays in Hell, subtitled In Which Our Intrepid Reporter Travels to the World's Worst Places and Asks, What's Funny About This? It's a collection of essays written in the 80s by P.J. O'Rourke. So it's travel writing. A lot of it is about, wars and stuff that was going on at the time. It was interesting. The politics and stuff was interesting because both at the same time, there are some of the stories where it's like, really, because like about the fall of communism and stuff, but this is before that happened, and the way he's writing about it, he thinks that will never happen. So that was really interesting, putting yourself back into that place where before all that stuff had happened. But then in other places it was really depressing because it was talking about trouble spots that are still trouble spots. And yeah, so that was that. Then there are 3 really good books that I read this month that I've already done reviews for, so I'm just going to mention them here. That's Persepolis, Lagoon and Ruby Moonlight. I'll put links to those reviews below if you're interested in any following up any of those. All 3 of those were really good reads. The last 2 things that I've read this month are The Sarantine Mosaic, which is actually 2 books. Well, it's sold as 2 books, but it really should not have been. This is one of my pet peeves. This is one story. It doesn't have any kind of conclusion at the end of the first book. It's just, clearly they decided it was too long and they needed to break it into 2. This author, Guy Gavriel Kay, specialises in standalones. This was a standalone that obviously just grew outside of its bounds since they've broken in 2, which annoys me because I figure if you're going to sell it as a book, it should have a beginning, a middle and an end. But apart from that, the story, the 2 books together, it's an amazing achievement. It's a fantasy, I suppose, but there really aren't terribly many fantasy elements. It's probably just referred to as that because he is known as a fantasy author. It's really an historical novel that is, he's changed the names and things. It's set in his alternative version of the Byzantine Empire. It's set in Constantinople. That's Sarantine. Sarantium in the book is Constantinople. And we have an artisan, a mosaicist, who is a master craftsman called up to the capital to create an artwork for the new temple and church, cathedral, but temple in this book that's being made, and gets drawn into the politics of the place. So there's stuff about charioteers, there's a whole bunch of political manoeuvring. So it's a kind of, there's lots of characters. It's not quite Games of Thronesian, but it's getting there. And the only other thing I would say about this book is that I got to like 20% left of the second book and I felt like it had finished. Because there's so many characters and he actually goes to some trouble to tie up the storylines of each character, there's quite a long conclusion, which some people like all the ends tied up. Some people find that frustrating. What can you say? And which I'm not going to tell you what it was, but there was a twist which I did not see on the very last page, which... especially after this really long concluding section, it was like, what? But maybe I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. So anyway, it was for people who like this sort of thing, historical epics, political fantasy, throne room dramas. It was beautifully done. It's the female characters are not, they are powerful, but they're pretty one-dimensional, but that's pretty normal, isn't it? Okay, and the last thing I actually just finished last night, this morning, is Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, which I've been meaning to read for years, and I finally got around to it. It's a science fiction set in the near future. Something terrible has gone wrong with the world, basically. It's not quite as standard dystopian because it's almost as though I guess it is a dystopian, but it's not a kind of Hunger Games or whatever where there's a new society or whatever. This is almost like everything's gone and we've just got our point of view character is called Snowman, although that wasn't his original name. A lot of the story is told in flashback where he's remembering stuff from his childhood and then throughout his life up until the thing that happened. The thing that happened was connected with people that he knew from his childhood, so that's how you tell the story. I thought it's not a long book, but I actually thought it started slowly. But the conclusion, the last, I don't know, third, I was really gripped, and it finishes quite cliffhangery. There is a conclusion, but it's cliffhangery, so it kind of made you want to go, oh, next book. But I'm not going to be doing that. The next thing that I'm going to start today, or if I have time today, my next book that I'm reading is Carpentaria by Alexis Wright. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. This is another Australian Aboriginal author. I talked a little bit about in one of my videos recently about reading Aboriginal authors and having to search them out because there's not a huge number of novels by Aboriginal authors and they're not widely known. Since I made that video, I've done a bit more research, and there is so far only one book that I've found that I thought, oh, of course, that's one I should have known, I should have read, and that is this, Carpentaria, which won a major literary award in Australia. So I'm looking forward to reading that, and I will let you know how it goes. Hope you're all well. Hope you've all had a good reading month, and I'd love to hear about what you guys have read, especially if you've read any of these books, and what you think about them. Talk to you later. Bye.